Good morning, everyone. Welcome to News Center's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us as we physically distance ourselves from John Richardson and Phil Harriman. Nothing personal, guys. Always glad to talk to you, though. Glad you could be with us.
Thank you.
Let's begin with the State Labor Department has ramped up its operations to handle overwhelming demand for new unemployment claims. Roughly 13% of Maine's workforce has filed for unemployment over the past month. Did the Mills administration perhaps drop the ball by not being prepared earlier to meet the surge that some people felt was coming? John, I'll start with you.
I think perhaps, but let's give the Mills administration a break. This is unprecedented, the number of people that were going to sign up for unemployment. No one understood the depth of this pandemic when all of this started. And so they tried the online system. They were doing their very best there. There were some complaints and some concerns raised by certain legislators about whether to hire more people or not. But I don't know that, given the great job that she's done so far, I'm willing to give her a pass on this because it looks like the claims have gone down for the first week in a very long time.
Phil, do you think this is going to be a political stone come election time?
I hope not. I see it the way John does. They've done the best that they can with the resources they have. We could not have anticipated this many people in such a short period of time signing up for unemployment benefits. There's no reason to play political gotcha here. What is going to be interesting to see, Pat, is that the people who are on unemployment are going to get an additional compensation benefit from the federal government, and hopefully that works seamlessly, or we'll have round two of confusion.
That's true. Well, that's supposed to begin this coming week. We'll find out if it really works.
Right.
The Press Herald reported late last week that the Mills administration held secret meetings with lawmakers on their efforts to manage the pandemic. They held meetings without any public notice, without any media involved, in what might have been a violation of the state's freedom of access law. Once press inquiries were made, further meetings were canceled. Phil, is this another case of just trying to deal with unexpected and uncharted territory?
Well, I just gave the governor and Commissioner Fortman a break on the question about unemployment benefits. I can't do that on this question, Pat, because this is not a rookie mistake of a new governor. Janet Mills was the was the Attorney General for the state of Maine. She knows the law as well as anyone. This is an embarrassment.
What do you think, John?
I put this into a minor mistake on the part of the Mills administration. I do think you're dealing with some experienced people that Phil just mentioned. I mean, the public can't be left out of briefings, period. They just can't be. And so I think that Governor Mills has been acting prudent through this entire pandemic. I think there were a couple of, her commissioners who perhaps, missed the opportunity to include the press. I think that they're going to do a better job. And the only good saving grace is that both Democrats and Republicans were briefed. Unfortunately, the public was left out.
Let's look at the U.S. Senate race. Sarah Gideon raised $7.1 million in the first quarter of 2020. That brings her total for the campaign so far to about $14.8 million. Senator Collins raised $2.4 million during this quarter, $13.2 for the cycle, and Senator Collins still has more cash on hand. John, what do those numbers say to you?
It tells me that Gideon is the presumptive favorite, that money is definitely moving in her direction. She is the challenger. She has to get her name out there. And so there's an unprecedented number of dollars being spent in this campaign, but I think it's about getting her name recognition out there because she's running against a very entrenched incumbent.
Phil, what do you think?
Well, what it tells me, Pat, is that the dark money that everyone talks about is alive and well on the liberal side of the political agenda. And let's not kid ourselves. This is not an election about the people of the state of Maine choosing the next U.S. senator. This is about big influences from around the country that have descended upon the state of Maine because we're an easy place to try to influence an election.
But Phil, this isn't dark money. This is legitimate contributions to the campaign. The dark money is huge, but that's a whole separate thing, right?
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that she was doing something untoward in terms of how she's raising money. But what I am trying to express is that for a first-time candidate whose political experience has been a state representative and the speaker of the Maine legislature attracting that kind of money from around the country. This isn't about a local election. This is about a national agenda.
A lawsuit was filed this past week by backers of ranked choice voting, trying to stop the Republican People's Veto, which would block the use of RCV during the November presidential election. The pro-RCV group says the Secretary of State acted in good faith, but erred in allowing this signature campaign to begin because they say you can't do a people's veto for a law that is already in the books. You'd have to use another method for that. Phil, does that make sense?
I think technically it does. I'd hate to be the one who has to explain it in a public forum to convince people that this is something that should wait until a ranked choice voting election actually occurs. It's going to be very interesting to see how quickly this gets to the court's attention and what they decide.
What do you think, John? Is this legitimate beef here?
Well, I tell you, it reminds me of an extra credit question on a law school exam. That's what it reminds me of. It's an interesting question. I do think that Matt Dunlap got it right. I think that just because Governor Mills didn't sign the legislation, it went into effect. It has the full force of law. And so as a result, I think Matt Dunlap made the right decision here, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, he said even though the law was on the books, they could gather the signatures for the people's veto. All right, we'll see how it plays out. President Trump said this past week that he really loves the movie Mutiny on the Bounty, and he says Democratic governors were kind of mutinying against him and his claim of total authority to decide when states should lift the lockdowns on businesses. Now, putting aside the fact that Captain Bligh is a sadistic tyrant and not necessarily a role model, the fact that the president has backed off a little on this, do you think we're now on a better course, Phil, that says we're starting to make a plan to reopen business and jumpstart the economy?
Yeah, I think the result is what we were all hoping for, which is we're now in a new phase where we can talk about how we regain our sense of normalcy again. But using the analogy of Mutiny on the Bounty is just, oh my God, I can't wait for NBC's new edition of Saturday Night Live.
John, what do you think?
Well, I think he was a lot more contrite when he spoke to the governors, more so than he was at his press conference. And I think it's because somebody slipped him a copy of the Constitution and showed him the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment says that the states have the power, right, to protect the health and welfare of its public. And I also think that he was very contrite as well because his polling, he got a big bump because the country came around him when the pandemic first started. But his polling has dropped 8 points. And I think he realized making a claim that he had supreme powers made him look more like Captain Bligh than it did President Trump.
On the presidential race, Joe Biden, the former vice president and the presumptive Democratic nominee, got the big endorsement he's been waiting for. His former boss, President Obama, has finally jumped on board. That goes along with endorsements from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. John, it seems as though this is a fairly quick rallying around a presumptive nominee, much faster than Democrats usually get this done. Why is it?
Well, I think what happened is that Democrats saw in 2016 what happened. It was a very late start to the endorsement process for Hillary Clinton. There was a lot of infighting as a result with Bernie Sanders hanging on in the primary for so long. I think that all of us as Democrats have decided we're not going to let that happen this time. We're going to get around the candidate. And I think that's why Obama, as the titular head, if you will, of the Democratic Party at the moment, before Biden steps in as the nominee, he stepped up and said, we're going to endorse him, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. It was a big, big week for Joe Biden.
And Phil, what do you think as a Republican? What's the impact here? Is this just a dog bites man story and not really a big headline when Obama and these others endorsed Joe Biden?
I don't think it's newsworthy because most everyone assumed that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. And so for all these luminaries to now say we endorse him is sort of a non-event. What would have been transformational is if President Obama had endorsed Joe Biden before all this unfolded. That would have been transformational.
All right. Let's wrap up with our winners and losers in politics this week. And Phil, we'll begin with you.
I have to name the loser of the week is Governor Janet Mills. Holding public meetings in private, not allowing the press access is not what our country was built on. So that's my loser. The winner of the week is Senator Susan Collins. She is one of the co-authors of the payroll protection plan that so many people in Maine have access to keep their jobs and pay their bills. She's my winner.
And John?
The loser of the week is President Trump. What he did with trying to defund the World Health Organization is just really upsetting and concerning. It's like taking rifles away from an army when they're trying to defend your country. It's just really unfortunate. The winner of the week is Joe Biden. Joe Biden's had a great week with all of these endorsements. Pulling the party together this early is really very, very helpful to him.
All right, John, Phil, thank you. Stay healthy. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
all for
You too.
joining us. We'll see you next time on Political Brew. News Center Maine is back after this.